Welcome to Alaska Earthquake Science Facts. I'm Carl Tate. Since their arrival in Alaska about 12,000 years ago to the time of colonist settlements, Russians in 1784, Alaska natives survived, advanced, and prospered. They experienced thousands of earthquakes. The cosmic calendar is a concept where the 13.8 billion year history of the universe is scaled down to a single year, where the Big Bang is January 1st at midnight, and right now is midnight 1 year later. So this is a way of putting the context of human lifespan, geology, the Earth into 1 year. So here's the calendar, and it's depicted in kind of a compressed format where a lot of the interesting activity, we might say, is happening at the very end. So we'll break this down here. In the first 11 months, the Earth forms on September 1st, just 4.6 billion years ago. So about 2/3, 3/4 through the year, Earth forms. Multicellular life on Earth, December 14th, that occurs 600 million years ago in the Cambridge explosion. So life starts December 14th. We look at the first 30 days of December, trace fossils, December 15th here, and then we see dinosaurs, Pangea with continents moving in plate tectonics, taking us all the way through December 30th. December 31st, the final day of this year, hominid evolution, and even at 11:56, 4 minutes from the end, we see human migration. And that's interesting because that ties into how people came into North America, and in particular into Alaska. So about 12,000 years ago, in this calendar, in the last 4 minutes, we have humans coming to Alaska. In the final minute shown at the bottom, things about the written record, all the way up to the end. So more familiar with old history, end of the last ice age. And so we can look at these time frame and merge them with a few other things of interest to thinking about earthquakes, when they were experienced, how they were recorded. And we can see here on the right, we start with the galaxy at 13 billion years ago. Earth forms 4.6 billion years ago. And in this time frame, MA refers to millions of years. KA refers to thousands of years. So 12 KA would be 12,000 years ago, or about 10,000 BCE, before the Common Era. So we'll be looking at a few of these events on the right. Plate tectonics, when it began, is controversial, but I'll show one idea that seems to be based in as much evidence as they can find. This is about kimberlites and the start of plate tectonics. And even more amazing about this idea is that kimberlites are the source of diamonds. So we have a link with geology and diamonds in this story. We want to know when plate tectonics began, and we'll consider any important Earth feature that shows significant temporal evolution. Kimberlites, the primary source of diamonds, are rare igneous features, and they analyze these. So a basic idea shown in the picture below is that more than 1 billion years ago, or 1,000 million years ago, there was no plate tectonics, but at some point in time, we get to a condition where it says subduction floods part of asthenosphere with water. And there's a picture of volcano forming. So what is the evidence for this, for when plate tectonics start? This shows the evidence. We don't need to go into the details, but on the bottom axis is time, going back in time. So this is in millions of years, going back 3 billion years, and the occurrence of lots of these evidence, kimberlites, ophiolites, blue schists, ultra high pressure metamorphic rocks. there's a lot of information in these last 600 million years. So drawing a line at, say, 800 here, as the authors have done, they're saying that it appears that most of the evidence occurs after that time period. And the reason we care about plate tectonics is because earthquakes arise from plate tectonics. So when plate tectonics started on Earth, that's when earthquakes started too. On to other times, this shows a time frame of early man, Homo sapiens. This is from Wikipedia, showing kind of when in this time frame did people arise and start experiencing these earthquakes that have been ongoing for all geologic time since plate tectonics started. So this shows at 4 million years, and then at 0.2 million years, Homo sapiens, so 200,000 years ago. Human migration into Alaska is a science paper in 2010 looking at sites of this era, archaeological sites, and this one particular discovery, a terminal Pleistocene child cremation and residential structure from eastern Beringia, Upward Sun River, major led by UAF scientists, and giving us some firm numbers on when people were in Alaska. Did they settle here? Did they just pass right on through? Well, they appear to have settled here. So then there's a huge gap. And just to point out, there's an 11,000 year gap in the timeline where people lived in Alaska, more than 11,000 years of Alaskan natives. And, I will just add to that that they were living with earthquakes. It wasn't the central part of surviving in Alaska, but we should acknowledge that this would have been part of life. And I had the real honor and fortune of being able to talk with two elders from Minto in 2014, Berkman and Sarah Silas. They'd been married for 70 years when I spoke with them. And I was particularly interested about earthquakes. One magnitude 7 earthquake from 1947, and they had vivid stories about that particular earthquake. Not necessarily one that was shared and that everyone in the community knew, but it was one that had left an impression on them. And we went out there, and this timeline, this headline kind of reflects that: Minto earthquakes then, now, and tomorrow. And so these stories are ways that we can connect and see how earthquakes are part of the culture of life in Alaska. 1784 was the Russian settlement, Three Saints Bay and Kodiak. This engraving shown here is depicting that. This was the first permanent settlement in Alaska. And interestingly, 4 years later, there was one of the largest earthquakes to have occurred on this section of the plate boundary, where one plate goes under the other. But of course, this is long before plate tectonics was known to people. And what was recorded in the old literature and translated here in a 1990 paper was, in Three Saints Bay, there was a tsunami somewhere approximately between 3 and 10 meters. And there was also tsunami in the sort of tens of meters further west, Shumagon Islands. This is where the Three Saints Harbor was, this Russian settlement in 1784. And only 4 years after they got there, a magnitude probably 9 scale earthquake hit. And these other items here, we go from this earliest reported earthquake, seismometers being deployed in 1897 globally. We consider that the instrumental era. And in Alaska, it really started with the first seismometer in 1904. And the modern era of global seismology could be considered 1960 and later. So that gives us some of our seismological marks in this time frame. And just to show, this is a letter from Baranov to Shelikov, two of the prominent Russians leading the colonization in Alaska in this time. Baranoff writes, "Our old harbor has become hopeless as a place for men to live in. After the earthquakes, the ground settled and became so low that there are regular straits between the buildings, and during extremely high tides, there is very little dry ground left." If that's intriguing to you, please check out the 1964 fact about static deformation that dropped much of southern Alaska down and created ghost forests, because this observation is uh, is what happens in large earthquakes along this plate boundary. Takeaway topics: the modern activity of earthquakes has been sustained over all time scales, included recorded history, which is since about 1800 in Alaska, prehistory, geological history, millions of years back to the start of plate tectonics on Earth. Earthquakes have coexisted with people in Alaska since they arrived 12,000 years ago. The written record of earthquakes in Alaska began with the Russians' arrival in Kodiak in 1784. The first major earthquake they recorded was 1788, probably a magnitude 9 that generated a large tsunami. Thank you for watching. Stick around for supplemental notes.